Welcome back to Pastor Plek's podcast. I'm so glad all of you are joining us as we're live right here on whatever platform you're watching us on. And I have in studio with me none other than Mrs. Catie Sas, straight from the slope. So glad you're here.
I'm so glad to be back.
Yeah, so
on level ground.
Let's talk about the altitude.
Oh, it was the worst.
Well, what?
Yeah.
What
you just
happened?
kind of felt like you were like subtle, like it was like this subtle, lingering, I feel like crap. Like
How high
all
were
4
you?
days. I mean, we were in Breckenridge.
Oh, yeah.
I don't really know.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's like-
there are mountains there.
Yeah, sometimes 14. You probably didn't climb a 14er, but you're probably up at around 10, 12,000 feet.
Yeah.
Okay, that's wild.
Yeah. And I mean, we had to like guzzle water. We had to we were drinking Pedialyte.
Are you a skier?
I skied one day.
How was that?
I have never skied before in my life.
How was
it
that?
was so fun until I had to stop. Like skiing, if you could just snap your fingers and stop,
Yeah.
skiing would be the most fun sport on the planet.
So, did you learn the pizza?
Yes, and my skis were not pizzaing apparently because I'm like going down, and it's like great. I went to ski school, like I learned all the things. I learned how to turn. I learned how to stop. But like, I thought ski school was great.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, okay, like I was just on little baby hills.
Yeah.
And it was great. And I left ski school going, maybe I can do this. And then later that day, Ryan's like, okay, well, let's go on like one of the slopes that we did earlier today. Like you could totally handle it. But also, I had never gotten on a, the little, like the flying benches. What are those called? The ones the ski lift. I had never gotten
Flying
on
benches, ladies and gentlemen.
bench.
The flying. So tell me about the flying bench.
Well, it was very fun riding on, but getting off,
Yeah, very challenging.
I like literally busted it.
Did you get drilled in the head and everything?
Oh yeah. So like Ryan was like telling me, he's like prepping me the whole way, and he's like, okay, so like whenever we get to this certain spot, you have to stand up and let it just kind of like push you a little bit, and you'll just glide right down, okay? And I'm like, right. Okay, just stand up and you'll glide. Stand up and glide. Okay, great. Done.
Yeah.
I stumbled, like could not get up. Like I was sitting, but you have your skis on. And so I'm like struggling to get up, and Ryan is sitting there Ryan's like, Catie, up, Catie, stand up. And I'm like, I'm trying to stand up. And I didn't stand up all the way. So I'm like kind of still in like standing, like halfway standing,
Right.
halfway sitting
Right.
position, not stable. So as this thing nudges me forward, my skis go, it's almost like they just went as fast as they possibly could. And so I fall backwards. Like
course.
I'm going so fast, and I don't know how to, I'm just like frantic,
Sure.
I had never been in that situation before. I panicked and then just slipped backwards, slammed my head against the snow, which I thought snow was soft. Like, no one told me that snow was hard. But thank God I was wearing a helmet.
Oh, good job.
So what for? Yeah, everyone made me wear a helmet.
Yeah, that was good of
I
them.
didn't really think I was like, you need helmets to ski, but I'm like, snow is soft. It's not soft.
Yeah.
And I fell a lot throughout. Like, well, and what was really frustrating is like the whole time I just kept thinking, I want this to be over.
Right.
Like, I just want to be done. Like, I want to go home. And I cried. Like there were tears shed
Did they freeze to your face or
going
anything?
going down this slope that Ryan thought that I could totally handle. And I did not handle it. And like all the, the like medic people that drive by on their like fancy little
snowmobiles,
ski cars, whatever they're called. And like they're like gliding down, and Christine is with me.
Yeah.
And Christine
Your
is like
sister-in-law.
she's a hardcore, like, dude, you got to get up. Like, just get up. And, okay, you can do this. Like, the faster you get down, the sooner it's over. And I'm sitting there crying, like, I can't do this. I just want to go home. And she's like, Catie, you have to get up and go. Like, get down the slope and it's over. And I'm like, wait, you know the sticks,
Yeah.
like the poles that you have to carry. So I'm like waving my poles in the air as the medics drive by, and they're like, "Hey, are you okay?" And I'm like, "I need help." And Christine's like, "Oh my gosh, Catie, no, don't call them over here." And I'm like, "Please help me."
And did they come?
They came over, and I'm thinking, "Thank God they're gonna rescue me." And they're like, "What? Are you okay? What's going on?" And I'm like, "I can't get up." And they're like, "Oh, okay." And I was like, "Can I have a ride?" And they're like, "We can't actually like
You have to be
give
actually
you a
hurt.
ride." Yeah, he's like, "We can't give you a ride down."
What,
the
do you know what kind of slope it was? It was green, blue, or black?
Green. It was green. Yeah. It was the easy. Like apparently it was the easiest one. And I'm like, Ryan's like, I thought you could do it. And I'm like, well, and like I had to learn how to ride one of those in ski school. It's it's called the magic carpet
Yeah.
or whatever,
Mhm.
like where you get on it and it moves. It's
Yeah.
like a flat escalator, I guess.
Right.
I don't know. And I'm riding by this dude. He's like running the machine, and I'm getting close to where it stops, where I have to like slide right off. And I'm like, holy crap, I think I'm going to fall. And the dude working it's like, no, you're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. You're not going to fall. And I looked at him and I said, I think you're underestimating my ability to fall. And I almost fell. So, but otherwise, it was beautiful. And, you know, I fell a lot. And it was really fun going fast, but it wasn't fun having to stop after going fast.
Yeah.
And like, I was just glad it was over.
So, ever going to go skiing again?
Probably not.
Yeah. All right. No,
Like-
no remedial ski school for you.
No, take me to the beach.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
Like-
mountains or a beach girl? You're a beach girl.
Yeah, I'm a mountains girl if I get to like sit inside and have coffee and look at the mountains
Yeah.
from the indoors.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I don't even know how to move on from there. Other than that was amazing.
Right. I'm here to entertain.
Yeah.
What else do I do here?
Well, while you were on the slopes, we were back here doing ministry, and we talked about.
I know, I was so sad. I missed the freaking episode with Tony.
It was pretty great.
What did y'all even talk about? Did you even have fun?
We talked about masturbation.
Stop.
Yeah. But we're gonna move on from that subject. We covered it completely.
That's so annoying.
I know.
What
All right,
is-
so we're going to talk about Jesus, and he was born in a manger. All right, so the story goes that you've got Caesar Augustus sends out a decree, and there is a bit of an issue that a lot of people, and I want to know if this affects you when I talk about this.
Mm-hmm.
So Caesar Augustus, the emperor of the time, sends out a decree that all the world should be registered. And it was done during the time when Quirinius was governor of Syria. Now, most people think that Quirinius, scholars think, you know, we know how reliable they can be. And I don't want to put any, I don't want to put shade on scholars if they're, wrong all the time. But so what the scholars do is they put, they say from about 6 AD, 7 AD is when Quirinius started his reign as governor of Syria, which is fine. The problem comes is that King Herod died in 4 BC. And we know from the Matthew account that King Herod was a pretty much crucial part of the Magi story. In fact, that's what we're talking about this week. And so they look at this and they say, the skeptics say, you can't trust the Bible because Luke is wrong. He has either the wrong people or the wrong dates or the wrong whatever. Because you can't have, if the scholars say that Quirinius was in 6 and 7 AD, he came to power, and Herod dies in 4 BC. Does that mess you up? When you hear that, does that mess you up?
No.
I didn't think so.
No.
Why not? This is why I love your perspective on this, because I think it's healthy.
Well, I just feel like the people that are just constantly out to prove the Bible wrong,
Right.
they just need to get over it. they need to move on. I mean,
Yeah. Well, so, and I appreciate that, because what you're saying is just because someone presents me with facts, and I put facts in air quotes, that seemingly contradict the Bible doesn't mean necessarily that they are true or that the Bible is wrong. And here's one way, I shared this on Sunday, one way you could look at this. The word, it says this was the first registration when Quirinius was governor of Syria. And you could say this protos, the word for first, could also mean before. This was before the registration when Quirinius was governor of Syria. And so it's easily, I don't know, the argument's easily defeated or deflected.
So are they saying like King Herod died before?
So he died before Quirinius was governor, is what they say. And so,
okay, but what does that have anything to do with?
So if Jesus is born when Quirinius is governor, but King Herod, he was born also when King Herod was king of Judea, that's a problem because he dies in 4 BC and Quirinius doesn't take over till 680. So that's an 8-year or 10-year span. 10-year span of
No headship?
They're not the same time, same place. So if Quirinius was at 6 BC, it'd be perfectly fine, and you could, because 6 BC, 4 BC, that all makes sense. You know, King Herod dies in 4 BC is what our scholars say, but he had to be alive for him to persecute Jesus, try to kill him, right? When the Magi come with the dream,
right?
And so Quirinius, who is governor of Syria, doesn't show up till 10 years later. That's problematic, if that's true. But this is the problem where either that could be true, that Quirinius does show up 10 years after Herod dies, and if you interpret, which is it's clearly done many times, this was before the registration when Quirinius was governor. That 10 years before, that's fine, that works. Or scholars could have been wrong. There's many ways to look at it.
I just feel like this is unnecessarily confusing.
Yeah, I think what happens for I think people who are skeptical of the Bible, to your point, they're looking to find a way that this is not true, and I'm not saying that everybody that's like a critical scholar of the New Testament is looking to find the Bible disproved. It's just that when they come across facts,
it's like when you're trying to write something or interpret something or put something together that happened like so long ago. Of course, there are probably going to be some like
gaps,
couple mistakes,
sure,
like a couple of things.
Right. And what we would say as Christians is that we believe the Bible is true and everyone else is probably wrong. And wrong by 10 years in 2,000 years ago is not that far off.
Right.
But even if that's true, that Quirinius doesn't take over till 6 and Caesar doesn't take over, Herod dies in 4 BC, the problem the problem is fixed by, this was before the registration when Quirinius was governor. And so there was a basis for taxing everybody to go to their own hometown around 680. Now, this is where the only problem with that, though, is that we talk about
are we losing listeners right now?
We might be, but I think people care.
Okay.
The problem with it is that you've got, what about Joseph and Mary? They went to be registered, so you can't say it's before the registration, but this is the taxing time before Quirinius came into power. So anyway, all that to say, it's solvable by just letting the text speak for itself, and
it doesn't deny that Jesus is real.
It doesn't deny Jesus is real, and you can find a historical basis for it with the words that we have to. I don't want to say work around as if we're like being shifty with history, but rather it's like anything. When you take a bias into something, then you automatically go, oh, well, this must not be true. Here's the facts. They don't point to this. But if your bias is, because we don't have no one here is unbiased, but if you go, oh, this is God's word, it must be true, and then so therefore here are the facts I'm presenting. Let me fit it into the truth that I know. Anyway, so that's probably enough on that. But one of the things we talked about was that God brought together a pagan king to send Jewish peasants to the city of their birth, which then fulfilled prophecy from hundreds of years before. I mean, this is sort of wild. And I think the part that excites me is that God puts the emperor into a bit role, and the primary figures of history become two peasants, which sort of flips the script on who's important. And I think sometimes, and this is the part that I think I would love to get your take on this, you can get mad at people in power, whether it's governmental or it's family, or especially with Christmas and the holidays come around, you can get mad at people who have ability to affect your Christmas, and then you make them the sovereign. And when I mean sovereign is they're in complete control of your happiness, as opposed to God. It was probably annoying, and this is the part I think it was probably annoying for Mary to be in her third trimester, to have to go by donkey. I don't know if she went by donkey or she walked, but to go 35 miles walking in the third trimester, and be exhausted and be irritated because some king put on a registration of taxation. Like, how would you feel if you were Mary in that position? You're 33, 34 weeks pregnant, and now you have to go make a 3-week journey.
I would not be thrilled.
Yeah. And you probably, like all of us, would complain about that emperor. He's a blah, you probably fill in all the blanks there. And I think that's the struggle that she's facing. But what I want the whole congregation and everyone listening to see is that God was in control of that inconvenience. And in fact, that inconvenience was for the good of God's purposes, for the baby to be born in Bethlehem, to fulfill Scripture, to then further give evidence for that this is the Son of God. So there you go.
Yeah.
But is there a part that, and maybe you're not like this, we can get frustrated with government people who make you do something, and we need to realize that God puts all those people in charge, and so whatever they do has to pass through a grid of God's sovereign grace. And so I think that's helpful, especially when you don't approve of presidential decisions or governmental positions or decisions. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I know. I'm going to get controversial, I guess, but I know that I was a bit frustrated when I felt like Biden was going to make this national law requiring everyone to get the COVID vaccine.
Right.
I remember that was really irritating.
Right.
And we were all kind of shoot, if this becomes
law, what do we do?
We just follow it because we have to abide by who God has put in power, or do we figure out how to, it was just kind of this is not something that we want.
Right.
But what do we do?
That's exactly right. And so then you'd have to say, in those moments when it's you're looking at a mandate, oh man, clearly God's behind it. If God allows it, it's in his sovereign will. But then you got to get into permissive versus moral will, and that's a whole different thing. But essentially, the permissive will is what God allows. That's not what he would decree. And then his moral will is this is right and this is wrong. And sometimes God permits things that are against his moral will so that we would have the choice to choose to follow him or choose to follow some pagan king. And I think that's not what this is about, but I think that's the reality, that God's still in charge even then, that gives us opportunity to kind of deal with the stress of having to trust him when circumstances. Right. Okay. So I do think that is true, and I think that speaks to a lot of us, especially when the new year's coming up, and you're going to be starting to do your taxes, and you can get angry and frustrated, and why is this and why is that, and then understand God's sovereign hands playing that somewhere. We've got to trust him. Okay, the second thing that we talked about on this past Sunday was God chose to reveal his plan of salvation to shepherds. And I'm not sure what you think about shepherds. We probably have very little contact with shepherds. But if I put it into context, maybe this might be easier for you to understand. Have you ever heard the term gypsy? Is that a familiar thing for you? Yeah. When you think gypsy, do you think someone you can trust? No. And so shepherds were nomadic. So they would show up in one area, then the next thing you know, they're in a different pasture somewhere else. And so anytime you're nomadic, in general, you don't trust them because I make you a promise, I got you, and then that person, you never see him again. And so that's sort of the reputation they had. Now, God has always had a fond, I don't know, he's had affection for shepherds. Abraham was a shepherd. Isaac, Jacob, they were all shepherds.
So shepherds. So this, I guess, is the first time I'm hearing this.
Yeah.
They were like nomadic.
Yeah, I mean,
They
they're the
didn't
ones
stay
out.
in
They
the
didn't.
same-
They didn't stay in the same. I mean, they couldn't because they'd eat up all the grass and not need to move on.
Oh.
And then you think about it too. It's like, they're wish they the people who go like, my dog is my friend. I do better with my dogs than people. They were most likely like that. They didn't do well with people, and they probably preferred to be out with the
Just
sheep.
be watching the sheep.
Yeah, but to be fair, all of the heroes of the Bible at one time were shepherds. So you've got Abraham, Isaac, Jacob,
David.
Joseph, David, Moses. Everybody was a shepherd at one point. And so God has a special affection for shepherds, and anytime he's wanted to call out the priests, he calls them shepherds, which is where we also get the term pastor. Pastor means shepherd in Greek.
Well, and I mean, you always refer to community group
Shepherds,
leaders as shepherds.
Right. So God has a positive view of shepherds. The world kind of had a negative view, and so what makes it kind of interesting with Luke was written to a Gentile audience, and so whenever you're reading it, when they read shepherds, they're like, "What? Of course." Shepherds would see angels. They see lots of things, right? Like this is where a gypsy nomadic people would say they saw all sorts of wild stuff, but you wouldn't trust it necessarily. And so why does God reveal his plan of salvation to shepherds? Give me your thoughts on that, just from your perspective.
Were they sort of like a lowly part of society?
Blue collar, not necessarily too lowly, but definitely not trusted. They weren't allowed to testify in like a Roman court. Women and shepherds weren't allowed to testify.
Right. Well, what I've seen in Scripture is that God loves to use those who are lower in, I guess, stature.
Yep, class, if you will.
To work his plan into.
And I think that's exactly it. I think God is intentionally...
Like, no one would have thought...
Right.
And shepherds would be the ones.
In fact, that would be like, oh, well, that's my proof against your view.
Right.
Shepherds were your first witnesses of angels. Of course, the shepherds saw angels.
It's just like, Mary was the first one to the,
right.
Like women were the first one to the tomb.
Right. And you're like, okay. Yeah, exactly. It's like God, with Easter, the people that couldn't testify in court were the first ones that, for all history, were reported to have witnessed the resurrection and were reported to have witnessed the virgin birth. Mm-hmm. And so that's
just how God humbles us.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's probably how he humbled a group of people in that day.
No, for sure. And I think that's exactly it. And I think that's why one of the things I talked about is why was Jesus put in a manger? From a practical standpoint. And the reason I think he was put in a manger, because a manger, we usually think of a manger as like a wooden thing. Most likely it was a stone, because there wasn't a lot of wood in that area, but it was most likely a stone like trough, but it's elevated. Well, and so when you think of where a feeding trough would be, what else is near a feeding trough?
Like cows poop.
So to get the baby off the ground, you put the baby in a manger and probably use the hay to soften.
Where did we get the word manger?
So it's actually it's a French origin word. Manger in French means to eat, and so that's just
because it's like if technically it was a feeding trough, then when did we start calling it a manger?
Yeah, I think we just stole the French word for it.
And it's a lot cuter. Than
way cuter. yeah. Manger is to eat.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So there might be a wine that you like that uses that word. So just think about it. Anyway, so what also is interesting. So it's so filthy. The other thing I always thought about too was like, at what point was holding the baby too hard? Right. I mean, like, I think we've all been there. Like,
because you try to apply like what you struggled with,
right,
to what Mary could
like,
have struggled
because
with.
she's giving birth naturally. She doesn't have a bathtub or whatever, right? To kind of epidural, and so she's on the floor in the poop and pee of the wherever the animals are, and she's like lets her rip, and then out comes the baby. Joseph's like, he doesn't, I don't know how much experience he's had delivering babies. Maybe he does know what he's doing. Cuts the cord.
Well, if he's never seen her naked before.
But fair enough. But he may have
Then-
delivered his sister's baby. I don't know. Like who knows how?
How old was he? Do we know for sure?
We
or is it
don't.
just like
This
a
is
bunch of
where
theories?
like we think Mary's a teenager, like 14, 15.
Okay.
And we think Joseph could be either 14 or 15, or he could have been 19 or 20.
I heard someone say like Joseph was like 30 years old, and this is how you can like approve of like older men dating teenagers, and I was like, I don't think that's
Yeah,
true.
I mean, even if it was true, that's not why you. That wouldn't be
Right.
prescriptive; it'd be descriptive. But I mean, we have no idea how old he
Yeah.
was.
So potentially teenagers.
Potentially teenagers, if they're the same age, or he could have been maybe 20, or 21, 22.
14 years old,
Wild.
giving birth naturally in a barn or whatever.
Or barn is what we've sort of given it. Cave maybe might be better, or like open air area where the feeding trough would be. Like there is no, we don't know, like there was no room in the inn, so it wasn't in a room, right? So it's probably somewhere where, and this is
Mary
where,
had to be tougher than all of us.
oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, well, it's just a different generation.
Whoa.
Yeah, so she gives birth. Then I always think of it this way: she passes out, she's exhausted, and then
Do
Joseph
you
is
just
sitting.
assume that? Are you just kind of writing your own
I'm writing my
story?
own script now.
Okay.
So we
okay.
don't know about this part, but for some
Like,
reason,
it sucks because no one was there.
right? No one was there, and we don't know, but we do know that the baby was put into a manger.
Right.
Why? And that's the part. That's my head. I'm
Because
like,
it was a container.
it was a container, but like,
It was
why
something
not
that you
hold
could
the
put-
baby? And I think that's where I'm like, do you think Mary would approve of Joseph putting him into a manger? This is something a guy would do.
Do we know if Joseph put him in the manger?
No, we don't know if anybody did. We don't know who put. So he somehow got into a manger.
Was there hay there?
I'm assuming there was,
Because
but
in all the pictures, he's on hay.
I think that's just because that's what's probably already in the manger.
Okay.
And they put him on top of the hay because it was soft, and he's in swaddling clothes to protect him from the nastiness of all the bugs in the hay. I don't know. Like, this is where I have no idea.
Yeah.
But the part that I ask is, does Joseph put him in the manger when Mary passes out because he was supposed to be holding him, and like, I'm just kind of tired.
I mean, it makes me think of like when the babies cry.
right.
Babies, they cry.
Yeah.
And when you can't figure out how to make them stop crying, then you go crazy.
Right. And then you could, shaken baby syndrome, the whole thing. And maybe it's like, I need to put this baby down. I'm going to walk away. So,
I can't even like imagine.
like,
them
I'm
in that
sure this is
day.
the Son of God, but this is
I'm
exhausting.
about to lose my mind.
Right.
I'm gonna put, but that's obvious. Like it's like I wonder what the terminology would have been then. Like how they would have communicated. Like this is stressing me out.
Oh, yeah. And of course, you're a mom. You're not supposed to be stressed out by a baby because you're supposed to love them and nurture them. But anyways, for some reason, he makes it to a manger, which was God's plan, because all of a sudden the shepherds are going like, I don't know how they're finding a baby in a manger. Maybe they're outside so they can hear the baby crying or something, and they show up and there's the baby in a manger, and Joseph and Mary are like, don't judge me, right? Like, and then they're like, oh, we came. They said the baby would be in a
Well,
manger.
because it's hard because you can't like apply our personalities now
Sure.
to then.
Sure.
But like how I just like I'm so curious socially what it was like.
I will.
then.
You're asking the same question I'm asking. So they come. So what's fun is that there's a bunch of signs that are given over time. So first, the first sign given is that Zechariah would be deaf and mute until the baby would be born, and that's how they knew that John would be the forerunner to the Christ.
Who was Zechariah again? Just
Zechariah
remind me.
was John the Baptist's dad.
Okay, that's right.
So, and then the sign for Mary was that Elizabeth was pregnant, and she's an old lady, and she obviously was a teenager. So she goes and visits Elizabeth, who's in her 6th month with the baby, and then the sign for the shepherds, they get a sign. They get an angel and a sign. The sign for the angels, or the sign for the shepherds, that the angel told them that they go somewhere into Bethlehem and they'd find a baby in swaddling clothes, which makes sense because that's what all babies are in, but it'd be laying in a manger. That would be weird. And so that's what's sort of exciting about that whole idea, that this baby is hanging out in a feeding trough. And I just love that story. All right, so then here's what I thought was even more cool. The shepherds got an angel, okay? They got an angel with the message, like, good news, great joy.
Oh, didn't they freak out at first?
They freaked out. In fact, the word used there is megaphobia. They were mega afraid, megaphobia.
Oh.
And they freak out. And this is the reason why, is like, shepherds, although they were doing a God-honoring, serving their country, they were not exactly the most righteous, clean people. Like, their language was probably a little bit more vulgar than most because they're out with sheep all day. And they're not super civilized. And I can imagine when the angel shows up, they freak out because their sin is exposed. Like it's like this. I don't know if I know you probably have never sped before, but if you're driving really fast and then all of a sudden you see a cop, you're like, and you slam on the brakes.
Yes.
That's probably what it felt like for them. Oh crap, we're screwed.
But how did angels appear?
They
just poof appeared. They didn't like come down from the sky.
It wasn't like, hey guys, we're coming down. I'm sure it was. There's multiple.
Like a mystical floating.
Well, it says the glory of the Lord shone all around them, whatever that means. So it just appeared glowing.
Yep. And then it came. Did he stop glowing for a second?
No. In fact, it got even crazier with a multitude of angels showed up and started saying. We don't know if they sang or said, "Glory to God in the highest, and on peace."
I've always wondered that.
Earth peace toward whom his favor rests.
Like angels, they were glowing.
I don't know what glory means. Glowing is what Shekinah glory kind of feels like it glows.
Like how in movies, when like an angel appears, it just looks like a normal person. Like,
sure, or it depends on the movie. Sometimes they glow.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, I don't know. So that part we don't know. But what we do know is that these shepherds get an angel that comes and directly tells them. And if you got an angel that said, and this is where skeptics are like, how come I don't get an angel? Everybody else hears the good news. And they wonder at what had the shepherds told them. They're like blown. That blows their mind. And they have the job. Shepherds who don't talk to people that often. They're like nomadic. They had the job, and they're probably doing it really poorly. And they're like cussing somebody out, like you're not gonna effing believe. This is me conjecturing. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm like, wait. I don't think that's how they talk.
That's not in the Bible. But I just I'm like, how would they have put it, right? Like, how would they have been like, you're not gonna believe what happened.
Yeah.
The angel came, and they're like, nah, shepherds. There they are. But the way that God entrusted the story of good news was through shepherds to tell about the Messiah being born. Isn't that hilarious? And again, I think this is where the shepherds get angels and that all we get are shepherds. In fact, over the years, it's just, I don't know how many people I'm sure some people get angels and some people get dreams, all that, but most of us get another shepherd sharing the good news of Jesus Christ. And they're sometimes not theologically correct, and they're just, they're all over the place, and you're just like, how in the world? Which kind of made me feel good as a pastor. Like, that's sort of my job, is to communicate the supernatural event comes through me, and I train, and I'm really working hard to communicate it really well. But the first shepherds had zero theological training, most likely. They just got an angel that told them the words, and they just shared it. And I think that's why the testimony of someone is super powerful, that they had an experiential thing, that it was memorable enough for Luke to go, let me write that down. And Mary's the one that treasured up in her heart. She probably communicated that to Luke. Pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah. How did Luke, who told Luke what?
So Luke interviewed a bunch of people. So when you read Luke 1, it says, hey, most excellent Theophilus, many have taken the job of writing an account of what happened, and so I too have taken it. And he's acknowledging that other stuff out there about Jesus is written. He wanted to write an orderly account.
Like, he wasn't there. He's just saying,
here's here's my documentary of the Jesus. Yeah. All right. That to me moves me. So the thing, what I challenged everybody is, what will you do with God's plan? Will you whine at the people who are in charge that God is clearly using to execute his plan? Are you going to think that you're too small or not that important enough to be like, oh, I'm just a shepherd. I work at Google. I work at Starbucks. I work as, a construction guy. I'm just a roofer, and I'm here in Austin because, we had that hailstorm not long ago, and everybody's here for roofing. Like, what are you here for? It doesn't really matter, but God's got a plan for you to share the good news with others. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The big question.
That's a big question. So what are you going to do with God's plan? That's kind of how I left people. And yeah, any thoughts from you what people should be doing with all that?
Just walk in the flesh. The Holy Spirit. I was mentally saying walk in the Spirit, and then the flesh came out. Don't walk in the flesh.
Don't walk in the flesh. Walk in the Spirit. Jesus came and walked in the flesh, but he was full. Anyway, we're not going to go there. All right. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you got any questions, we would love to hear from you. whether wherever you're at, however you are, we would love to just sort of wrestle through with you questions about faith, culture, and everything in between. So make sure you subscribe, and let us know what you're thinking, what you're watching, how you're experiencing this. We would love to hear from you. So from our house to yours, have an awesome week of worship.